Hello and welcome to the 2021 Toronto International Film Festival. My name is Ravi Srinivasan and I'm one of the Canadian programmers here at Tiff. We're thrilled to be hosting this special digital Q&A for the world premiere screenings of Haya Waseem's Quickening. We're joined today by Arooj Azim, one of Tiff's rising stars this year, as well as the writer-director Haya Waseem. Welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for letting us.
Hi, I want to start with you and maybe hear a little bit about your journey to this point. You were born in Pakistan. You came to Canada at 16, I believe, and went to film school, Sheridan Canadian Film Center. You had your 2016 short Shahzad premiere at the festival here at TIFF. Very successful in the commercial world, and now your debut feature is world premiering at TIFF. You seem to defied a lot of odds, and I'm wondering if you can share insights to, how you've made it to this point and, the kind of support you've had and I'm sure there's a lot of people watching who, look like you and maybe want to be like you. How did you get to this point and what are some, insights you can share?
I think the biggest thing is finding collaborators, finding people and building a space where the people that you trust, the people that you admire can all come together and make something. That's been the key. Like I went to film school, but before film school, I didn't know anything about making movies. So I found my earliest collaborator, my closest collaborator, my partner, Chris Liu, who shot the film. And the two of us just started making movies together. I come from an editing background, so I would cut, he would shoot, and we would create little films. And that just kept us focused because I know there's a lot of obstacles and it's not easy. But if I started to think about that side of things, it became overwhelming. All I had to do was kind of focus on what interested me and making sure that I'm not compromising on what I resonate with. And then when that was clear and I had someone as close as Chris, then it was just building that collective and that family. And that led to this point. The feature is the first feature, first time I got a chance to really expand on a canvas and the people that were a part of that. I think that was the key to making it. I couldn't have done it without everybody's help. Yeah.
Right. And so now we're here with Quickening, and I'm wondering if you can talk about the conception of this narrative and how, or if any of these elements were, in the story that are explored here were autobiographical in nature, and, what elements of this were from your story growing up?
It's such a privilege to be able to tell stories and explore stories. I really feel like, especially nowadays, presently, I'm thinking a lot about our voice and the having a platform to explore, let alone make a movie. It's just overwhelming, especially at this time. But exploring stories, I do think there's a lot of autobiographical elements, but I sort of disassociate from what I'm making at the same time. That allows me to then really be personal with it. So it's autobiographical, but not in the sense of the word. It's more a collection of emotions that a lot of us share. A lot of women like me have the same feelings, but the story might not be the same. So that's how the story came to be. It started with certain emotions and questioning where they come from, and then certain events started to shape in the form of this film.
Right. And so one of the ideas that I feel that you explore in Quickening is, I feel an experience that many POCs, people of color, sort of go through growing up, is this kind of constant push and pull of the desire to separate and be an individual and sort of, pave a way for yourself, but while also, having allegiance to your culture and your heritage and your family. I'm wondering, is that an experience that you had that you wanted to, express here in this story?
Definitely. I think Aruj would feel the same way. It's like some of us have chosen not to relate to either end of the spectrum. And so then you kind of fall in between these cracks, and it's like silly, because it's just like, I look back, you know, we're maybe 10 years apart, Aruj and I look back, like I was like, why did I put myself through that experience? You know, like, why not just pick my Pakistani friends, or why not just pick my Canadian friends and rebel against my parents, and, you know, you just choose that. But there's something about being allowed. Again, there's this this thing that I'm very humbled by and appreciate so much now. This allowance to explore who I am and who I want to be created that space. And maybe there's not enough stories that are shared that allow me to realize at the moment that this is normal, or this is an experience among many others. But at the time, it feels very isolating. So yeah, definitely that push and pull. I feel like hopefully a lot of people relate to that, but I don't necessarily know that I knew of stories that way. It was either I was interested in Canadian and North American stories or global stories, or I had Pakistan, and, you know, I didn't know that there's a line between the two. You can exist at any point of that. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So Aruj, I want to get to you. You are one of our Tiff Rising Stars this year, and deliver a phenomenal performance in what I believe is your first leading role in a feature film. Can you talk about, you know, the process of getting attached to this project? And then, you know, and then maybe we can also after hear from Haya about, you know, casting your own real life parents in their roles in this film, and what that was like, you know, acting with your parents, and how much of it was real, maybe. Yeah, so Aruj, love to hear about that.
So, like Haya's been saying, sorry about my voice, I work at a camp, so I'm screaming camp songs, but it's mostly like the story is very familiar, as Haya said. As a woman of color growing up, especially as an immigrant as well, in a new place, completely different traditions. Once I read the story, I was like, this, I mean, come on, everyone's been through this. You don't know where you fit in, and it's not just something people of color go through, it's what everyone goes through. You're transitioning into adulthood, you're trying to figure out who you want to be with, where you want to fit in. So reading the story, it felt very natural for me to fall into the role, but also is very different, as in, like I said, the story isn't exactly like my story growing up, but it was very close to my heart. So it was very easy for me to quickly adapt to it, express the feelings I felt, where you feel like an outsider almost, and you don't feel accommodated or included. So I really like that part of the story, and that helped me get into the role a lot.
And so because both of you, you know, would have maybe experienced something similar to what was written on the page, like was there any moments of, you know, collaboration in terms of, you know, where things would maybe shift because, you know, you give examples of experience, like what kind of, you know, working relationship was that like for you two as you were developing, you know, what would come to the screen?
So again, this is my first film, but I had the pleasure to work with Haya because she was very, very accommodating. She would ask me, how do you feel the character would take this, without just putting the idea into my head? It was honestly like a leader, not more like someone telling me what to do, it was incredible. She was like, how do you think the actor would act? How do you think Sheila would react in the situation? And then we would both talk about it before shooting almost any scene. We would sit down and be like, okay, what do we want to express? What do we want to do? And it was very, very communicative. Like, she would check in every day. And that really helped me as an actor. Again, doing this for the first time, it really helped me feel heard and seen, and, you know, just wanted. So thank you, Haya. She really helped me with that.
No, I mean, Aruj worked really hard. That's the thing you were mentioning, like, you know, it's a family affair. Your parents are there. I met Aruj when she was 11, and then we didn't see each other for like 10 years. And then suddenly we're on set together, and it's a very hyper real situation because it's real parents, it's real, you know, shared emotions. So, but I think how much Arooj might have trusted me, it was everyone was sharing that trust.
Mm-hmm.
It was amidst the pandemic. So, you know, it's like, it's all these things. So we kind of protected each other from our circumstances. And so it was very collaborative. And I remember Arooj's mom telling me, like, halfway through the shoot, near the end, she's like, Arooj is different. Like, she's become like Sheila, and, you know, she's usually very vibrant, and, you know, and now she like has these moments where she's just thinking, and I'm like, oh, it's just like so special that we are in this zone right now, you know.
So I want to ask about the casting process. You know, going with Arooj's real life parents in those roles. I'm wondering if you can talk about, you know, the kind of conversations behind the scenes, because, you know, it's something we've seen before in film and television, but it is a pretty big risk to take, and, you know, it really paid off here. There's a certain level of authenticity that really comes out. That you experienced here. And I'm wondering, you know, what were the conversations behind the scenes? Was there some doubt at all? Can you talk about that creative process?
Yeah, I had actually called Haya Waseem, Arooj's dad, who's a good friend of my dad's. And Asher is actually a celebrated filmmaker and actor in Pakistan. And so I was calling him because we needed parents in the movie. And I knew Arooj was, you know, I knew Arooj, but I didn't know where life had taken us. And when I was telling the story to Asher, it turned out it was on speakerphone, and the whole family was there listening to the story. And we had this conversation about the movie all together. So where I had this nervousness, I was like, I'll ask Asher, then I'll ask Bushra, then I'll ask Arooj, and I'll make my way through the family and try and convince them and see if this is possible. I didn't have to go through those steps. We already just jumped right into it. And suddenly the script made sense. Like, as soon as I thought about the three of them, I didn't have to do any finicky tweaks with the script. It felt like they could carry the movie. And the conversations were a lot about, you know, the conversations are interesting because the story is experienced, but it's not necessarily expressed and perhaps not openly spoken about in communities. It's not, you know, like the most casual conversation to have. So our conversations were very delicate and just about comfort and like, do you relate to this? And is this something that you can stand behind? And if the answer was yes, we just kept moving forward. This form of how the movie was expressed was a kind of a collective comfort level and getting behind each role, and to a point where, you know, Bushra came on set and she was like, I know this now, I'm ready for this, you know. And it was just like, so everyone came ready for their part. Somehow they found what they relate to. So the conversations were more about like getting on the same page and seeing if this one story can express, at least emotionally, what we're all experiencing or have experienced.
And Arooj, how was that experience for you, you know, working with your parents? And, you know, Asher, your father, is a filmmaker. Did he ever secretly kind of give you any direction at all, or did he refrain from that?
Haya was very good about that. She made sure that if I was doing something, I was completely with her and just with the team, and nobody extra was really getting to me, because I think the reason why the movie seems so authentic, at least on my part, is because she gave me the blessing of not seeing myself on screen. So I wasn't worried about, do I look like this, or am I acting right? I was just honestly being a sponge. And in my head, I'm going to only listen to Haya because she's the director, and any note she would give me, I would just be like, you know, just please, more. And I would just act it out. But with my parents, I have a very close relationship with them, my mom especially. So doing our scenes where we're like, you know, just like arguing like really loudly, like that might have been different or a little difficult, but the same push and pull was there. Like, so we would come to set, we would act out these scenes, and it's really interesting to see, because I've obviously lived with my parents my whole life, but seeing how they work in a professional environment was something like I had never really seen. So they were so different from me. I was so different from them. So it was honestly really cool. And then once we're done shooting the scene, we all have lunch together and like we're laughing. So it's a really, I'm so grateful. It was an amazing experience.
I found it very insightful that, you know, the family depicted in this film, you know, relatively successful and, you know, affluent to a certain degree, but we're experiencing a lot of internal struggle. And, you know, I feel that there's this kind of misconception that immigrants, you know, who are, you know, now in Canada or even the United States, you know, that, you know, they've all escaped like war and turmoil and they're simply happy to just be here. And but just as every other race and culture, we experience internal struggles, family turmoil, and increasing like pressure to keep up with everybody else. And I was wondering, is that something you intended to explore here? Because, you know, it's you haven't really seen it that much in especially like Canadian cinema, and it was kind of refreshing to sort of, you know, see. I'm wondering if that was sort of one of the themes that you were intentionally trying to navigate here.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that question. I mean, it's true, and I don't know if I've unpacked all my feelings towards it. That's why making a movie about it helps. But all the movies that I could see in the North American sphere about immigrants was war and struggle and trying to assimilate, and I felt, again, I think that contributed to feeling lost in terms of where I belong in terms of a media perspective, because I didn't quite have that experience immigrating, and so that created its own. It was collecting all the embarrassment or shame in my cart and trying to see where I belong with all those ingredients. And with this, I think it allowed me to get past that and see, well, how do I feel, and acknowledge those feelings and emotions, and that allowed me to relate to people I grew up with, no matter where they came from, a lot more, and it allowed me to relate to being a woman, because there's like a hierarchy almost. There's so many things that you have to. I think everyone has to consider when they're thinking about their identity, and getting past where I came from and how I came here allowed me to then confront how I feel about other things. So that was definitely a part of the writing process. And I think there's still more to explore in that world. But that's how far we got a chance to explore, at least for now.
Yeah, no, it was super effective. We'll get both of you out of here on this last question for Haya here. You know, you're one of only a few Canadian female person of color to premiere their film at TIFF, and you know that's changing as we sort of progress every year. But you know, and there's been a lot of change in the funding systems and the development systems over the last 5-6 years. But I'm wondering, can you speak about how you feel about the progression that's taking place in the Canadian film landscape and for the communities that you represent?
I think the changes are good. They're great. I mean, I wouldn't have had an opportunity to make a first feature at all if the Talent to Watch the telefilm micro-budget fund didn't exist. But the nuance there is that it's a very large pool, so I can feel like I can get through. But before that, I didn't necessarily have that confidence. I think there's a long way we still have to go. And to me, as a filmmaker and as someone who has a voice and wants to express my point of view, I had to wait for an opportunity where I felt like people would open the floodgates and let me in, rather than actually selecting me for who I am and what I have to say. So there's a bit of, it's a bittersweet feeling, but because I could not have done this without this opportunity. But leading up to this point, I kind of had to feel like an outsider and an independent person that just has to focus on making work and trying to keep my eyes open for opportunities, because it's opening up, but there's certain blind spots that we need to, connect the dots with, and hopefully with more people expressing that, because this should be where stories from all perspectives are celebrated and really embraced. And I think it's only just beginning to be that way. Hopefully it progresses and speeds up and grows.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think this film is going to be one of the cogs to, you know, influence other young people who look like the both of you to that, you know, this film will inspire them to be creators on their own. And so Haya and Aruj, on behalf of Tiff and Toronto, I want to thank you both for joining us for this virtual Q&A. And thank you so much for bringing us this film.
Thank you for having us.